Memoir or autobiography? What's the difference? How do you know how to tell your story? What do you leave in? What do you take out? How do you actually write a good memoir that really grabs people? You're going to find out today. Hi, I'm Dan Janelle. I've written more than a dozen books that have been translated to 6 languages. I'm a ghostwriter, book coach, and developmental editor, and I can help you write your book. And if I can't, then I can find someone who can in my trusted network. And one of my trusted network people today, I'm pleased to introduce you to, is Victoria Andersen, who's written 3 memoirs and is a book coach for memoir writers. And she can help you figure out how to get your story out of your head and into print. Victoria, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here with you, Dan.
Thanks, Victoria. How did you get started writing a memoir? So tell me a little bit more about yourself and how you do memoirs. Do you write them for yourself? Are you writing them for other people? Tell me the whole story and then we'll figure it out.
I didn't start out writing memoirs. I started out doing fiction and screenplays. I mean, I am a business major and I sort of I've written all my life, but in college, my senior year is really what kind of started to stir up. And I had professors trying to have me change careers, and I was in my senior year of business. So that didn't work out. And I kind of left alone. And then probably in my 20s, there was just a lot of upheaval and strange paranormal that was coming up. So I was running a successful antique business with my husband. And when it fell apart, literally overnight, I used journaling to kind of sort things out, wondering if paranormal incidences were, connected to all this hot mess. And I created these journals just over a course of a few years. And at some point, I decided to turn them into books, 3 books. And
Cool. Okay. We'll record over this again so we get it in the proper order. Yeah. Now, do you want to help people write memoirs?
I do. I think just writing is very cathartic, regardless of what you write. There is a certain, I call it magic, that goes with writing, no matter what your genre is. But there's something, memoirs are now very near and dear to me. So I want to encourage others to do that and help them sort out, their life chaos and try to make any sense out of that.
Cool. Now, Victoria, I've heard that memoirs are not autobiographies. Can you tell us the difference?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I know they're used interchangeably, but autobiographies are usually chronological. They start at point A, move all the way to point B from the beginning to maybe near the end of life. And they're usually featuring of historical or celebrities tend to write these, but memoir is a little bit looser format. You can use your whole life. You can do part of your life. You can do flashbacks, experiences. It doesn't have to be the entire life story or just part of your life. And they're generally written by average folks who have a story to tell that they want to get out for their, others who maybe can be assisted by turning a mess into a message as well.
Cool. I love that. Mess to message. I love that. I used to say mess to success, but I think mess to message is even cooler. Thank you so much. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah,
but I'll credit
absolutely.
You. I was in a networking session just yesterday with a bunch of other authors of all different stripes. I'm a nonfiction author and a business writer, and there were people in there who were memoir writers or memoir readers, and one woman was actually a memoir writer. And other people chimed in and said, "Oh, I love reading memoirs." And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder why. And they answered immediately. And they said, "I love seeing how people have overcome their issues and their struggles and their obstacles. And I find it very uplifting. So I don't know if this is a male female thing that's in dynamic here, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Would you agree with that? Or what other big picture ideas do you have to frame what a memoir is?
No, that is exactly the point of, I know the male brain goes, I'll show you how to fix the problem. You tell me what the problem is, done. There's what I'm going to tell. But women tend to like the journey and they want to get into the emotion, because that's something too. Another key point, the differences between memoir and autobiography is that autobiography are very they're very a matter of fact. This is what happened, when it happened. Memoirs, you dive into the emotion. That's what draws your reader in. They want to hear the agony or the great euphoric happiness, and you take them on that emotional journey with you.
Wow, you certainly know your field. And this is why I do not do memoirs. And so I always refer people who want memoirs to my trusted network of memoir writers, of which I will now consider you a good partner. So tell us, what are a couple of tips you have for people who want to write their memoirs?
Well, you definitely want to focus on all your human conditions. With my memoirs, I got into them because I was keeping track of all these paranormal experiences. When I had premonitions of like 9/11 or the Oklahoma City bombing. I mean, I went into great detail in some of these premonitions. And I did not get the ooh and ah that I was expecting from that. In the backdrop of telling my premonition adventures, basically, there was the story of like a controlling mother and the cheating boyfriend and the backstabbing good friends. That's what appealed to my readers. It was like, oh, that other stuff's cool, but yeah, oh man, your mother was just like my mother. And I had a boyfriend just like that. And he did just like that to me too. So really, you want to keep the human condition, don't try to just pull out all the details, because memoirs, it does have a cathartic feeling, but they are a challenge to write if you've been through a lot of trauma. And unlike maybe a 10-step process that you can do as a nonfiction, you really need to pause, kind of grieve sometimes, and move past that. But it's that rawness of your feelings that connect your readers. They want to hear your gory details. They may be very painful to write about, but your readers want those details. So if you happen to date a famous person, but had a lot of family drama, the whole, or you work for a famous person and had a lot of family drama, focus on the family drama. That's where your gold mine is.
Wow, that's fascinating. I once had a client who wanted to write a memoir, and this is you'll understand why I don't coach memoir writing after this experience. She could talk it, but she couldn't write it down. And she had a good writing background, so I know she could write. But I think in some ways she was looking for therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you work with a book coach or developmental editor for your memoir, how would you advise that book coach or developmental editor to interact with their client, the writer, going through these kinds of stories? How would they get the most out of those kinds of interview sessions and writing sessions?
Well, I would highly recommend getting getting a developmental editor, because even your bad guys in your life, you want to always be sure you can present some goodness about them, because that's part of your healing process. And don't necessarily make it about them, but how you work through that, and trying to navigate that an abusive partner or father. You want to bring out I guess, monster like in them. But at some point, you need to kind of carve away and just remember the humanity. And there's a certain way you can navigate your dialogue and word choice. You don't want to sugarcoat anything, but you don't want to just make it kind of like a throw them under the bus, feature in your book. So has to be some sort of a win or better understanding that you came out of it, even with the most horrific experience.
Why would you say that? Is it because there's some good in everyone, or these characters need to be made sympathetic, or that the protagonist would say, how could they ever possibly be in that situation? What's wrong with them? I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. There's a little monster in all of us. There really is. We don't like to dive into our dark side, but I think through these horrific people, you can understand your dark side better and not be afraid of it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm glad I asked the question, because
Yeah.
that was an answer I was not expecting. I framed the question properly, but it's a great nugget of wisdom and inspiration that you just shared with us. That's fantastic. When I write a lot of my books for coaches and consultants who are telling their personal stories, it's not their memoirs, but it's like, here's an incident from my life that shows trust or loyalty or charity or whatever, in a business context. And then I advise them to put in some, coaching questions. So the reader can immediately say, oh, well, you want this situation. What does it mean to me? So we have some reflective coaching questions. Have you ever been in a situation where something like this has happened to you? What did you do about it? What happened as a result of it? What do you wish you had done differently? But that's in a business kind of coaching context. I'm wondering, do you advise those kinds of questions in a memoir, or do you just want people to read through the story and just have their bring out the crying towels?
Well, every story must have a middle, beginning, middle, and end.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, one of the things like I do in my memoir is every single horrific monster in my life has actually given me a valuable nugget that has helped me. I didn't understand it at the time, but has helped me down the way. And had I not experienced that, it's like I wouldn't have had better leverage over dealing with what came down the line. So I think it's important that you bring the reader to some sort of conclusion about what did you process through all of this, and what can the reader, I actually put, like, at the end of my memoirs, what I felt like and what I'm hoping you understand, like trials by fire, although, there's witch trials that don't end so well, but there's also, if you understand, my husband's a jeweler, and the importance of burning out the dross. I don't know if you're in like goldsmithing. The dross is the filler metals
Mm-hmm.
in gold. So the more you heat it, the more the dross is burnt out. And you're at the end of the firing and, the quenching, the firing, quenching, you get a solid piece of pure gold.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Great analogy.
Mm-hmm.
In the world of speaking, there's this dictum that says, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how that relates to memoir writing. Do you hit people over the head and say, so don't marry a narcissist? Or if you see these tendencies, they're probably a narcissist. How far would you go between being a narrator and being an instructor?
Well, here's the thing. Anytime you tell somebody to avoid something, you know what they're going to do. Like the don't, they're going to do it. So what I recommend is, if you find yourself in the situation, might be helpful to read other memoirs, because there are narcissists, and it's unfortunately with narcissists, not to get too much into the psychology, but if you've attracted one narcissist, you probably have a whole batch of them all around you. So you might as well educate yourself. If you are with one, you might consider writing a book on what your strategy was working with it. I mean, that's ultimately find out, because here's another thing too, is when people are in situations, what they're also looking for in memoirs, they're not sure how to feel. And the memoir gives them a validation of, I'm okay, I've been there, and that's exactly how I felt. So you validate what they've experienced. And that's another benefit of memoir writing, is to, express feelings that, because especially in a narcissist, you're not sure what your feelings are. So if you read a book on somebody who's already been through a narcissist, you can have at least a benchmark to know where you need to be, a starting point, and then validate if you're not sure how to feel about it.
Very cool. Let's talk about craft for a second as we come to our conclusion.
Sure.
How many words or how many pages should be in a good memoir? Because I remember getting a prospect from, I think she was from Holland. She'd written like 250,000 words, which is
sounds like how I write.
250,000 words is like just short of like the World Book Encyclopedia, I think.
Yeah. Yes. And I could understand that, because my first book, Touched, was over 500 pages.
Wow.
Yeah. And when I was approached or I had my manuscript signed on with the company, they were like, publisher says you have to keep chopping. We got it down to 100. My editor, they're like, keep chopping. So ultimately, I think I settled on 335, but I know memoir writers tend to be in the over 5. That's kind of normal. That's why you probably want to work with an developmental editor to just kind of trim and streamline you to make it a quick read. I mean, that's one of the good things that I got feedback on my books, is that they're a very quick read, that you don't feel like they're, hundreds of pages. Like I feel like I started, I couldn't put it down, and boom, I was done. Didn't feel like 300 pages.
Okay, so it's 300 pages. You didn't say the word pages or words. So I wasn't sure if you're talking about 300,000 words or 300.
No. I think my original was like 82,000 or something. It was kind of up there. But as far as pages, I think if you work with a developmental editor, or if you have a lot to say, just break it up in multiple books. I think the sweet spots, you want to try not to do more than 200.
Cool. Great. Victoria, how can people get in touch with you? And we'll put the names of your books in the show notes later.
Okay, wonderful. You can watch my podcast, the Leap Into Your Story podcast. You can find that on various podcast mediums. You can go to my website at leapintoyourstory.com, and you can find out more information, including my new paid course, as well as, if you're interested, a free course there to try out. So there you go.
Great. Thank you for being with us today, Victoria. And everyone who's listening, thank you for listening to this podcast. We have another podcast on how to write your journals and how to journal with Lisa Tenner. Be sure to click on that and watch that view. And also be sure to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. So it's delightful that you're all here. I hope you learned a lot. Check back next week. We have more than 120 other episodes here that will show you how to write your book in a flash. I'm Dan Janelle. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Write Your Book in a Flash podcast with Dan Janelle, the only podcast that shows you exactly how people just like you have built their businesses by writing a book. If you'd like to write your book but don't know where to start, you can find great information at writeyourbookinaflash.com. If you're ready to take your next step to write the book that can transform your business, I invite you to schedule a free, no obligation consulting call with me by going to writeyourbookinaflash.com. We'll be back next week with another insightful interview to help you become a top business leader.